All right, everybody, welcome back. We are diving into some pretty heavy stuff today.
Yeah, definitely heavy stuff.
The war in Ukraine, specifically the possibility of a ceasefire.
Yeah, a ceasefire.
You've probably been following along with the news and everything going on and seen some of the headlines recently about former President Trump meeting with some French and Ukrainian leaders.
Yeah, I saw that.
And there's a Raven AP article that reports on some pretty interesting statements that he made.
Interesting, for sure.
So we're going to dive into all of that.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So one of the things that really stood out to me was Trump's call for an immediate ceasefire.
Right.
And the thing that really stood out to me about that was that he cited like hundreds of thousands of casualties.
Hundreds of thousands, yeah, on both sides. That's a huge number, a lot higher than we've heard before. Makes you wonder where he's getting those numbers from.
Yeah, it definitely raises questions about where those numbers are coming from and what his motivations are for putting that information out there, especially given that like the official casualty figures have been pretty hard to come by.
Yeah, that's been one of the really difficult things about this war, is trying to get accurate casualty figures. Both sides have been very tight-lipped about it, understandably.
Right.
So it's hard to know for sure how many people have actually been killed or injured.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that Trump's statement is probably more about trying to influence public opinion or, pressure for negotiations rather than reflecting any kind of hard data.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
One thing we do know from Zelenskyy is that Ukraine has officially reported 43,000 soldiers killed.
Yeah.
And 370,000 wounded.
Yeah. So that's a horrific number of people, but still significantly lower than what Trump is suggesting.
Right. And, even those lower numbers are still a devastating loss of life, obviously.
Right.
I think it's important to remember that behind every single one of those numbers is a human being. A family, a story.
Absolutely.
It's really heartbreaking.
So we have these casualty figures, and then we have the fact that Zelenskyy has said that he's open to talks.
He has said that.
But he's also very firm on wanting a just peace for Ukraine.
Just peace. That's the big question, isn't it? What does that even look like in this situation?
Yeah, what would that even mean in this situation?
Well, from Ukraine's perspective, it probably includes several things. First of all, regaining their territorial integrity.
Okay.
Which means all Russian forces withdraw from the occupied areas, and that includes Crimea.
Right.
Secondly, they're going to want significant reparations from Russia.
Okay.
For all the damage that's been inflicted on their infrastructure and their economy.
Right.
And finally, they're going to want to see individuals held accountable for war crimes.
Okay.
Through some kind of international tribunals.
Those are some pretty hefty demands.
They are.
Especially considering the current state of things on the ground.
Yeah, the AP article describes it as this brutal reality. They talk about grinding positional warfare.
Grinding positional warfare. I mean, what does that even mean for the soldiers fighting? And what does it mean for the possibility of either side actually achieving its goals?
Well, essentially, it means that the conflict has kind of devolved into this bloody stalemate.
Oh, wow.
Both sides are dug in. They're entrenched in defensive positions.
Okay.
And that leads to these heavy losses with very little territorial gains.
Right.
And it's just an incredibly brutal way to fight a war. It's incredibly demoralizing for the soldiers involved.
Right.
And it also makes a decisive victory for either side increasingly unlikely.
Right. So this is looking more and more like this could be a really protracted conflict.
It really does.
Yeah.
And, one that could drag on for years.
Yeah. And we're already seeing some of the effects of that.
Right.
Like with the energy prices and global food supplies being strained.
It's having a real impact on the global community and.
And of course, there's always the risk that things could escalate.
Always.
Especially with NATO's involvement.
Right. And if this drags on for years, imagine all of those problems just amplified.
Yeah.
I mean, we could see a resurgence of Cold War tensions. We could see a further fracturing of the global economy. Increased instability in regions that are already struggling with conflict.
So we've got all this going on. We've got these dramatically different casualty figures. We've got Trump pushing for a ceasefire.
Yeah.
We've got Zelenskyy holding firm on his conditions for a just peace.
Right.
And we've got a war that's increasingly looking like a horrifying stalemate. I mean, what does this all mean for the people who are caught in the middle of this?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it underscores the immense human cost of this war.
Yeah.
And that's a cost that's often lost in all the political maneuvering and the strategic analysis. But every day, this conflict continues. Lives are being lost. Families are being torn apart. Futures are being shattered.
Yeah.
Finding a path to a just and lasting peace is paramount, but the challenges are just monumental. It requires a genuine commitment to dialogue, a willingness to compromise. And I think a recognition of that shared humanity that binds us even amidst conflict.
It really does leave us with a lot to think about.
It does.
What would a just peace even look like in this situation?
It's hard to say.
And how can we begin to reconcile these drastically different narratives and objectives?
Yeah.
These are questions that don't really have easy answers, but I think they're questions that we all need to grapple with
We do.
as we continue to follow this unfolding tragedy.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for diving in with us today. It's always a difficult topic, but we appreciate you joining us, and we hope that you continue to stay informed and engaged.
Thanks for having me.
And we will be back next week with another deep dive.